My wife said, I invited my ex to my birthday, don't embarrass me or I'll leave with him. I replied, no problem. At the door, I shook his hand. She's all yours, I was leaving anyway. But when she saw what I'd left on the table, she instantly panicked. 3 days before her 30th birthday, my wife, Claire, poured herself a glass of wine, leaned against the kitchen counter, and delivered an ultimatum without looking me in the eye. Mark is coming on Saturday, she said casually. I invited him. If you roll your eyes, make a passive-aggressive comment, or embarrass me in front of everyone, I'll pack my bags and leave with him. I'm serious, David. Mark was her college ex. The one who got away. The one she constantly compared me to whenever I worked late, forgot to pick up dry cleaning, or refused to finance another one of her luxury weekend getaways. For 2 years, I had walked on eggshells, constantly trying to prove I was enough. I paid for our downtown apartment, covered her car notes, and bankrolled her lifestyle, while she worked part-time at a boutique and treated our marriage like a stepping stone. Looking at her standing there, daring me to start a fight, something inside me finally went cold. The anger just vanished. No problem, I replied quietly. She blinked, confused by the lack of resistance. Good. Glad we're on the same page. She thought she had won. She thought she had reduced me to a broken, compliant doormat. She had no idea that for the past month I had been quietly organizing my life. I knew she had been texting Mark. I knew they met for drinks while I was out of town on business. I even knew Mark was completely broke, living off credit cards and couch surfing while trying to convince Claire to leave me and fund his latest failing startup idea. Claire had built a fantasy in her head. Keep David for the money, keep Mark for the excitement, and play both sides until she decided which one served her better. Saturday evening arrived. The apartment was filled with 20 of our friends. Music was playing, and Claire was basking in the center of the living room, glowing in an expensive emerald dress I had bought her for our anniversary. At 8:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. The room went quiet. Everyone knew the history. Claire looked at me with a smirk, her eyes daring me to crack. I smiled, walked to the front door, and pulled it open. There stood Mark. He was wearing an unironed blazer, holding a single cheap rose, sporting the smug, arrogant grin of a man who thought he was walking in to steal another man's life. David, Mark said, nodding with false bravado. Thanks for having me, man. I didn't scowl. I didn't raise my voice. I extended my hand, looked him directly in the eyes, and gave him a firm handshake. She's all yours, I said clearly, loud enough for the entire entryway to hear. I was leaving anyway. Mark's smirk froze. Claire's face instantly drained of color. Before anyone could say a word, I grabbed my duffel bag from the coat closet, pocketed my keys, and walked out the door without looking back. I took the elevator down, got into my car, and drove to a hotel across the city. 20 minutes later, my phone exploded. 10 missed calls from Claire, 5 from her sister, countless texts from mutual friends. I ignored every single call and opened the security camera app on my phone to check a living room feed. Claire was standing by the dining table, hyperventilating, surrounded by our guests. In her trembling hands, she held the thick black folder I had left sitting right next to her birthday cake. It wasn't a handwritten letter begging her to stay. It was a complete clinical dismantling of her entire reality. Inside that folder was, first, an official copy of the divorce petition filed and stamped by my attorney the previous morning. Second, the 30-day notice to vacate the apartment. The lease had always been under my name and paid through my corporate housing stipend. My company was relocating me to the Chicago office on Monday, and the lease was terminated effective the end of the week. Third, the documentation showing her name had been removed as an authorized user on all my credit cards, and the joint account, which only contained my earnings, had been closed. And finally, printed transcripts of her text messages with Mark, where Mark explicitly told her, make sure David transfers the apartment into your name before you file for separation, so we don't have to pay rent. I watched through the camera as Claire's knees gave out. She dropped the folder, papers scattering across the hardwood floor. She turned frantically to Mark, begging him to tell her they'd figure it out. But Mark had already stepped back. The moment he realized the apartment was gone, the money was gone, and there was nothing left to leech from. His romantic charm vanished. He was already backing toward the door, leaving her entirely alone in the wreckage of the life she thought she controlled. I closed the app, turned my phone on Do Not Disturb, and finally went to sleep.